Let's now carry on with our lesson. Now let's learn how to recite the last part of Surat Al-Mulk, starting from verse 25 to the end of the surah, which is verse 30. In these verses, Allah Almighty says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Still they ask the believers, when will this trap come to pass, if what you say is true? Say, O Prophet, that the knowledge is with Allah alone, and I am only sent with a clear warning. Then when they see the torment drawing near, the faces of the disbelievers will become gloomy, and it will be said to them, this is what you claimed would never come. Say, O Prophet, consider this, whether Allah causes me and those with me to die, or shows us mercy, who will save the disbelievers from a painful punishment? Say, He is the most compassionate, in Him alone we believe, and in Him alone we trust. You will soon know who is clearly astray. Say, consider this, if your water were to sink into the earth, then who else could bring you flowing water? Let's get to know the meaning of some important words mentioned in this last surah. Drawing near, approaching or getting closer. Gloomy, full of humiliation and shame. Flowing water, visible water that is easy to obtain. Now let's explain these noble verses in an easy way for you. We find that Allah Almighty speaks throughout the noble verses entirely about the Day of Judgment, which is the true promise. It is the day Allah has promised His servants to hold them accountable for their deeds, allowing them to enter them either into paradise or the fire. Specifically in verses 25 and 26, Allah Almighty talks about the Day of Judgment and that it is a true promise, emphasizing that only Allah Almighty knows when it will happen. Moving on to verse 27, Allah Almighty describes the state of the disbelievers on that day. Next, verses 28 to 30 highlight that believing in the oneness of Allah leads to salvation from the horrors of the Day of Judgment and the torment of hellfire. Now let's discuss the meaning of the verses 25 and 26. In verse 25 and 26 of Surat Al-Mulk, Allah Almighty tells us how disbelievers reject the idea of the Day of Judgment. They make fun of those who believe in it. They used to tease and make fun of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, repeatedly, asking him when the Day of Judgment would be, and saying, if you're telling the truth, when is this judgment day of yours? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to respond to them by saying, only Allah Almighty knows the exact time of the Day of Judgment. He knew it was his duty to warn them not to disbelieve in Allah Almighty, not to worship other gods, and not to go down the wrong path. He also informs them of the punishment for not believing in Him as a messenger from Allah Almighty. It's his responsibility to remind people about the Day of Judgment. Now we will discuss the meaning of the 27th verse in Surat Al-Mulk, which discusses the scene of the Day of Judgment and the condition of the disbelievers on that day. In the 27th verse of Surat Al-Mulk, Allah Almighty informs us about the state of the disbelievers when they return to Allah Almighty on the Day of Judgment, which they had denied. Allah Almighty says that when the disbelievers return to Allah Almighty on the Day of Judgment and see the punishment very close to them, that's when they realize that hellfire is waiting for them. Sadness and gloom will show on their faces. They will feel ashamed and humiliated. They are told, this is the day you didn't believe in, the one you used to say wasn't real. Now taste the punishment for not believing in it. As for the believers, Allah has guided them to the truth and to the straight path. May Allah protect us all from the horrors of the Day of Judgment, which He has prepared for the disbelievers. Now let's talk about the meaning of the verses from 28 to 30, which explain the oneness of Allah is the salvation from the horrors of the Day of Judgment and from hellfire. In the final verses of Surat Al-Mulk, specifically from verses 28 to verse 30, Allah Almighty commands His noble Prophet, peace be upon him, to respond to the disbelievers who deny the Day of Judgment. Allah instructs him to say that on the Day of Judgment, people will come to know who followed the truth and who chose the path of disbelief and misguidance. Allah Almighty also addresses the disbelievers, saying that you are in need of your Creator in all aspects of your life. So if you were to look at one of Allah's blessings upon you, like water, you would find that no one could bring it to you if Allah Almighty prevented it from reaching you. Now which of you can recite and properly interpret the verses 25 to 30 of Surat Al-Mulk? Well done, my friends. In conclusion, we have learned how to properly recite and interpret the verses 12 to 30 of Surat Al-Mulk. We have learned that persistence in performing good deeds is the path to attaining the pleasure of Allah Almighty. We have also learned that we must appreciate the blessings of Allah Almighty upon us by believing in Him and being thankful to Him. We learned that we should consistently seek to learn halal sustenance. We learned that believing in the oneness of Allah Almighty and having faith in that the Day of Judgment is true and that Allah alone is the one who knows it is the way to salvation from the horrors of that day. Finally, we learned that we should rely on Allah Almighty and depend on Him in all of our affairs because He is our sole Creator